everyone, and welcome to another Hobby Memorial Library virtual event. We are so excited today. We have Mr. Bob Ayres of Shield Ranch. He is going to be talking to us today about land stewardship and water conservation. Mr. Ayres, he's the author of Shadow of Wings. It's a chap book and is published by Main Street Rag Press. He has published poems in literary magazines and anthologies, and he's the winner of the 2013 Literal, did I say it right? Press Broadside Contest. He received his MFA from the Warren Wilson Program for Writers, and he grew up in San Antonio and has lived in Austin since 1985. Welcome, Mr. Ayres. That was a mouthful. You are multi-talented, and you have a lot of different things that you're responsible for. So we kind of hope to hear all of this wonderful stuff. And to answer your question about your PowerPoint, you're good. I think it's all going to work. So welcome.
Thank you, Cynthia, for the introduction. And well, it's a pleasure to join the Central Texas College community today and to talk with you about land stewardship and water conservation. In addition to writing poetry, I manage our family's ranch, my family's ranch, and have been working in the arena of land stewardship and conservation for the last 30 years. So I'll begin by talking to you about what we're doing with respect to private land stewardship and water conservation, and then we'll switch over and I'll read some poems toward the end. So specifically, I'd like to talk to you about the ways that private landowners can and do contribute to enhancing the water and other natural resources of the state of Texas in ways that make our communities more resilient to the impacts of climate change. To those of you joining from around the world, a special welcome from Texas, and to veterans and those serving now in our armed forces, a special thanks to you and your families for your service and sacrifice. So Shield Ranch is a 6,400-acre wildland located just 18 miles southwest of Austin. Our solemn purpose is to steward and protect the natural treasures of the Texas Hill Country. We're home to a mosaic of habitats, a diverse community of native plants and animals, and over 6 miles of Barton Creek. Shield Ranch is sustainably managed for the benefit of both people and nature, and you can see the location of the ranch on Barton Creek, just south and west of downtown Austin. So this land was acquired by my maternal grandparents, Fred and Vera Shield. Fred Shield was born and raised in San Saba and McCulloch counties, which I understand have historical connections to CTC. My sister and I are third-generation owners of Shield Ranch, and this year we have welcomed the first 2 members of the 5th generation of our family to be connected to this place. We acknowledge that Shield Ranch today is comprised of lands that were home to indigenous people, including the Comanche, the Lipan Apache, and the Tonkawa. We recognize the vital contributions the descendants of indigenous peoples make to our communities today as a testament to their strength and resilience. So there are 3 principal ways that we manage Shield Ranch to increase water quality and water quantity. And the first is through livestock grazing, which we've done ever since my grandparents purchased the ranch, and again in 1938. And we use a rotational grazing system, which is made possible by wire fencing. You can see a little bit of a traditional barbed wire fence on the right-hand side of this photo. And the fencing enables ranchers to manage grazing behavior of cattle to more closely mimic the high-intensity, short-duration impacts of bison on grassland ecosystems. In some instances, when we have alternative sources of water, we can also use fencing to exclude cattle from sensitive riparian areas. We also practice deferred grazing, that is, removing cattle from the landscape. And in fact, we removed cattle from the ranch 4 years ago to allow recovery from the impacts of the 2011 to 2012 drought of record that you all will remember. Together with good rains last year, we saw an increase in desirable prairie grass species such as yellow Indian grass and big blue stem. Healthy grasslands build soils that absorb and filter water and may increase stream flows and replenish groundwater systems as well. We're going to have time for questions toward the end. So if you have a question for me, please just enter that into the chat, and Cynthia, I think, will be tracking those. So there are two other ways that we actively manage land. Both pertain to brush management. And we do that mechanically with equipment that can both cut and mulch. These are ash juniper trees, commonly known as cedar. They're a native plant, but they're invasive and they drink a lot of water. So they were controlled historically by fire. And since we're in a semi-urban area, or wildland urban interface, as we say, we rely mostly on mechanical means for juniper removal, which can increase water inputs into the soil and also the diversity of native flora and fauna. We do prescribe burning sometimes when we're able to. And again, this will control ash juniper and invigorate grasslands and increase water inputs to the system. So I'd like to talk next about conserving land for water. And just a few statistics that you may or may not know. The Texas population will rise by 20 million people, is projected to rise by 20 million people over the next 50 years. The second fact is that 93% of the land in Texas is privately owned. But then from 1997 to 2017, Texas lost 2.2 million acres of working lands to development and land fragmentation. So all of this together, combined with increasing temperatures, rainfall variability, and increasing demand for water, means that water is going to decrease in availability in the coming years. And so that just highlights the importance of managing well-managed private lands, and also to finding ways to preserve some of these lands permanently, in perpetuity, so that they can continue to provide these ecosystem services for our communities. And one tool for that, and a tool that we've utilized at Shield Ranch, are conservation easements. So a conservation easement is a voluntary legal agreement between a landowner and the entity which holds the easement, usually a land trust. Easements are most often held by land trusts, though cities, counties, and other entities may also hold easements. The landowner agrees to restrict certain uses of the property in order to protect its natural or cultural features, its conservation value. The easement holder monitors compliance with the terms of the agreement. Easements may be donated or they may be sold. a landowner may be compensated for an easement, and that transaction is referred to as the purchase of development rights. So in this image, you see my mom back in 1998 signing the conservation easements, which she and my sister and I placed on the ranch with the Nature Conservancy of Texas. That's the gold area in the map on the left, and the city of Austin to the right. So the Nature Conservancy easement we donated, and we sold the easement to the city. So we still own the land. We received part of its development value, but it won't actually be developed. We also left out in the upper left and bottom left corners some areas of the ranch that were near road intersections and that may be developed in the future. But 93% of the ranch we put into conservation easements. This map shows the creek setbacks that were part of the easement for water quality. So the lighter areas are areas that are upland, more suitable for development. The blue areas, the darker they get, the more sensitive they are. And so any of the retained development rights that we have, which I'll reference in a minute, are outside of those darkest areas. And so we're restricted. So there are creek setbacks, and then there are restrictions on developing on steeper slopes. So what the easements allow us to do, and easements can be custom designed for for each landowner, so long as they meet also the needs of the entity that holds them. And our easements allow us to continue traditional agricultural operations, recreational uses of the land, build additional home sites for family, and also to do some building within strict limits for nonprofit uses on the property. And I'll show you one of those in a little bit. We are prohibited from commercial or residential subdivision. We are required to do some ongoing brush management because both of these easements were of interest to the easement holders because of the water quality impacts of the ranch relative to Barton Creek and Barton Springs in downtown Austin. So that's kind of how the conservation easements work. And these are in perpetuity. That means they're permanent. They transfer with the title. If we leave the land to our kids, or if we were to sell it, the new owner would be subject to the same restrictions. So, and throughout Texas, about 2 million acres have been protected by conservation easements as a way of ensuring that these benefits will be available permanently. Another way that we can support water quality and water quantity is through partnerships with governmental entities who have responsibility for or concerned about water issues. The city of Austin has conducted water quality testing on Shield Ranch for the last 30 years. This data became the basis for the program to purchase conservation easements from willing landowners that resulted in our easement with the city of Austin. We partnered with the Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District that has monitored wells on Shield Ranch to measure the impacts of surrounding development on groundwater levels. And they've also installed a weather station to better understand the correlation of rainfall to groundwater recharge. Private landowners can also support science and academic research, and a lot of that is by simply allowing access to universities, colleges and universities, and other scientists to the land to do the work they need to do. One project that we have going on currently is with the University of Texas Department of Integrated Biology and some salamander research that they have going on. This research, you can see in the map to the right, the areas within the within the Edwards Aquifer that they're focusing. And this research, interestingly, uses the technique of eDNA to better understand the distribution of the salamander genus Eurisia across central Texas. And it's sometimes difficult to find the salamanders because they sometimes will be, into the karst features under the water and not actually, even sometimes you can find them turning over rocks, but sometimes they're inside, underground caves and such. And so the eDNA can detect the presence of the species even when they're not visible. And this can aid in the designation of critical habitat and produce more robust conservation and recovery assessment and plans. So this is one of several projects going on the ranch right now. Another is with Texas State, and they're looking to understand the life cycles of certain macroinvertebrates that are indicators of water quality, but that live in these stream systems like Barton Creek that are not perennial, that don't flow year round. So how is it that they survive those periods, those dry periods and drought? And that's what this study seeks to understand. We also work with neighbors and other concerned citizens and nonprofit environmental and conservation organizations to advocate for policies that enhance water quality and water conservation. In an urbanizing area, we're especially concerned about the impacts of poorly designed and maintained wastewater systems on water that flows through our ranch. That can come from land application systems or from direct discharge of treated effluent into Central Texas waterways. We have at times contested permit applications for treatment facilities to ensure that those systems will actually work as designed and not pollute the creeks. This algae bloom on the left is not what you want to find in your creek, but it happens. We're also currently advocating for statewide pristine streams legislation that would prohibit direct discharge of treated effluent into Texas' most sensitive waterways. As you may know, Texas counties have very little limited authority to regulate land use, and so that resides mostly with cities and municipalities. But outside of those cities and municipalities, besides septic systems and roads, their county has very little authority. So we've actively supported the efforts of groups like the Hill Country Alliance that do advocate for legislation giving counties greater authority to manage growth, because we feel like that will help balance growth with the protection of our natural resources. At Shield Ranch, we are retrofitting old improvements and adapting new technologies as we build new improvements. We're trying to practice what we preach. One thing that we did some years ago was go back to these old cement water storage tanks that are associated with our water wells for watering livestock and also for wildlife. And we put cement covers on them. They'd always been open air. But by doing that, we saved thousands of gallons each year for each reservoir that was lost to evaporation. We've also included rainwater systems on 4 family and staff residences on the ranch. That is saving groundwater. It's also saving us from using groundwater that's not really very desirable to use. So that's a win-win for us and for the environment. I mentioned that we're allowed under our easements to build some facilities for nonprofit use. This is a recent aerial photograph of a facility that we're building to be a permanent home for a residential summer camp that we operate on the ranch, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But this will allow us also to do year-round nature immersion programming for groups in the community. Our architects use the idea, the image, the metaphor of a leaf, which on the one hand captures sunlight and through photosynthesis converts it to energy that plants can use, but also sheds water to the root system for the benefit of the plant. So our off-grid facility, the roof will be covered in solar panels, which will provide the electricity for the facility. And you can see in the image here below the rainwater storage tanks, the water will drain off the roofs, be collected in those two 30,000-gallon reservoirs. And through very careful conservation of that water, we anticipate that we can operate our camp and year-round programming only from rainwater. Additionally, we've discovered that in South Africa, they developed these environmental composting, new generation of composting toilets. So we'll have the first on-site septic facility permitted by Travis County and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality that uses these EnviroLoo waterless toilets. They're a low-maintenance human waste system that requires very little site disturbance and no infrastructure. The passive solar and airflow design requires no electricity, no chemicals or additives, no water, and creates no odor. So let's hope they work like they're supposed to. Finally, I want to talk to you about the education and outreach we do at Shield Ranch. We talked about how most of the land in Texas is privately owned. Private landowners have the opportunity to provide access to communities that historically have had less access to wild places and restorative time outdoors. So since for the last 15 years, we've operated a nature immersion summer camp, as I mentioned, on Shield Ranch. We provide, El Ranchito is the name, and we provide youth who would not otherwise have the opportunity a residential camp experience with rich educational content. And this is an informal science program, so it's all by the experience that the kids are having. So top left, you see kids doing water quality testing from Rocky Creek, which is the tributary of Barton Creek where we hold the camp. On the right, going clockwise, you see kids collecting macroinvertebrates, and different types of macroinvertebrates indicate either better or worse water quality. So according to the bugs they find, they get a sense for the quality of the water in Rocky Creek, which is happily pretty high. And then finally, there's no better way to learn about water than to experience it directly. And I think that's true for all of us. And we try to make sure that the kids at camp have fun. But we also understand that those direct experiences develop a love for the outdoors and a desire to protect our natural resources as they become adults and voters in our community. So I actually am going to jump a slide and come back. So just to kind of conclude this part of what I wanted to share, the sustainable management and conservation of private lands in Texas contributes to vibrant ecological communities that in turn provide ecosystem services, including clean air and water, upon which our growing and urbanizing population depends. And I'll back up and just share that we do have employment opportunities at Shield Ranch. In fact, even now we're recruiting staff for our 2022 El Ranchito summer camp season. So if you're an outdoors person and you're looking for employment this summer. We have a wonderful community. We work hard and have a lot of fun. And you can visit our website. The link is here, and I hope you'll check us out. We also have natural resource internships, and we have just filled that position for the summer of 2022. But we do this every year, so if that's something that would be of interest, please make note of that info@shieldranch.com address. So I will pause here and see if anybody has had a question or anything we'd like to talk about before I read a few poems. Cynthia, I am not hearing you.
Sorry. Alyssa, are there any questions at the moment? While she's looking, I do have a question. You know, you've got this vast land and you've got these education, you know, these camps, and you're teaching, you're obviously, you and your family, or you know, putting what you preach to work with the new composting and all of that. As a person, you know, a land conservator, what would you personally say is the most important aspect of what you do? What do you feel is your most passionate about?
Well, I mean, I am most passionate about making sure that this place that we love, you know, so deeply remains um, in something like its current state, or hopefully better for future generations. But I'd also add that I feel like while all of the work that we do in every dimension that I've talked about, we do collaboratively with many partners. As I mentioned, government entities, universities, neighbors, nonprofit organizations, and the camp. We have a host of partners that have been with us from the beginning and make that possible every summer, including volunteers. And so that's been a pleasure because I learned so much from people who know more than I do about the areas of their expertise, and it's just enabled us to do far more than we ever could do by ourselves.
Cool. And I just have one question, because I see that there was no questions at the moment. Once y'all catch all these invertebrates, what do y'all do with them? Do you study them or what?
Yeah, we do. They put them in little plastic dishes, and then they can set them alongside a chart that shows the picture of the actual critter they're looking at, and then they're broken down into, you know, the groups that suggest high water quality and intermediate water quality and really poor water quality. And then once that's happened, we just let them loose back in the creek.
That's very cool. That's very cool. Well, we have no questions now, so if you want to just keep going.
Yeah, so what I think I will do is stop sharing my screen for now, and then what I would like to do is to read you all some poems. I've been writing poetry in the early 1980s, and while I write about all sorts of things, I'm especially drawn to write about what I see and observe in the natural world, including the often fraught relationship of human beings with the natural community to which we belong. So with that in mind, I thought I would read you 7 poems that explore our human interface with the natural world. And I should warn you that I'm a birder, and so birds have a way of finding their way into my poems. So with that disclaimer, the first poem I'd like to read is set out in the mountains of West Texas, in the Davis Mountains, and the title is Damage. The hog I shot lies twitching in the 2-track. To give her time to die, I walked toward the creek, expecting blood in the dirt. Instead, a river of ants, so many, so close together. No sign, I just ran over them. Already a different river. On a rock, a wasp flits its wings, neon blue, orange abdomen and admonition. Between bowed legs, it lugs a caterpillar enmeshed in its own cocoon. In the road, two grasshoppers, one I'd injured driving by, and a carnivorous one slowly devouring the head of the wounded one. Larvae of some species of sarcophagus fly wriggle in the yolk yellow blood of the grasshopper host they'd been eating alive but hadn't had time to kill. At water's edge, the little sulfurs that can lift off from the mud flutter like autumn leaves on a windy day before settling singly or in tight clusters beside the damaged ones. I turn around, walk past my truck to the sow. The hair on her hind legs is softer than I would have thought. I drag her through the waist-high grass, crushing pigweed, snake cotton, spiderwort, globe mallow. Okay, that's the most gruesome one. The next two poems were inspired by the construction of a new shopping mall near Shield Ranch in Bee Cave. Hill Country Galleria. This is actually, for those of you who may be poets, this is actually a modified sonnet. So shorter lines, but a 14-line form. Hill Country Galleria. The kestrel tilting on the wire surveys the 100-acre site that just last winter was the field that fueled her lilting falcon flight. She watches rock saws slicing trenches and dozers climbing piles of dirt 3 stories high, toppling gigantic boulders, each a buffalo's girth. The grass is gone, flocks of sparrows, soil gone, mice, their burrows. She's living on the brink of locally extinct. And then here's this Hill Country Galleria too. So this is after the mall is built. Rushes and reeds have a foothold in the mall's retention pond, where a pair of scaup, 3 coots, and a dozen ring-necked ducks circle round. Kingfisher on an ornamental fence, pipits bobbing along the lawn, what once had been the kestrel's field. On an island in an asphalt sea, in a scrawny leafless tree, sits a mockingbird, not doing or saying anything. Done for the day with all of that and the hassle of getting here to there expediently. Look of certitude, knowledge born of watching without judgment or creed, having been here first, belonging as much to the place now as to the place it was before, proprietary, yet owning nothing, unassuming, not amused. This next poem was inspired by a trip to Louisiana. It's called Dick Sissel, and if you don't know, the Dick Sissel is a small songbird that miraculously migrates across the Gulf of Mexico this time each year, and its name sounds like it's 3-syllable song. And the poem is in 2 parts. I'll just pause between the 2 parts. Dick Sissel. On Grand Isle, post-Katrina, which whacked the east end, and post-Rita, which pushed a wave over the west end, though you'd never know it now. Debris hauled off who knows where. Higher-end homes mostly put back together, only higher up. The Exxon plant humming again, its sempiternal flame burning bright, what with oil at $120 a barrel. Choppers like giant yellow dragonflies shuttle cruise supplies back and forth to pop-up rigs offshore. The little waves plash harmlessly while laughing gulls, brown pelicans, and an accoutrement of terns purposefully fly all in the same direction as though they're late coming home from work. Sunsets, a few tangerine clouds with a smudge of plum reflected in retreating waves, where a smattering of sanderlings and ruddy turnstones dodge aerosol cans and 5-gallon buckets washed ashore. Just above the tide line rests dead gull, more trash, and water hyacinth from Bayou Teche, flushed into the Gulf where salt killed it, plus a big fish head, a drum with bulging eyes. At first light, ghost crab tracks crisscross the dunes, the requisite gulls looking a bit hungover, sun rising, not a cloud in sight, calm, porpoises along the shore, the rig still twinkling prettily in the early light. Sometime between sunset and the night before and the now, barn swallows dipping in and out of dunes, the whole beach has been combed like a sand trap as far as you can see both ways. The tractors rake, leaving ripples and the occasional whorl like a fingerprint where it turned around. The dead gull is gone, the hyacinth too, and the fish head, and the team at the chamber is glad to know they've got things under control, ready for tourists, ready for this Dick Sissel perched on a stalk of dune grass, singing his snappy little song. He's made it back across the Gulf because it's springtime, and that's what Dick Sissels do. Driftwood logs roll in the surf with plastic bags like jellyfish, waiting their turn to wash ashore, and more dead hyacinth. Next, I'll read 2 short poems that are actually set in Tennessee, where I went to college and spend time in the summers. Across the ravine, a Carolina wren belts out his song, void of loathing, adulation, his part in this makeshift ensemble in a southern Appalachian forest, which admits, too, a wood chipper, its crew shouting to be heard over the engine, barking dogs, while across the ravine, a million years wide, another wren, piercing, insistent, replies. Blog post from my screen porch on an August afternoon. Gnatcatchers forage upward through the poplar, then flutter fall, flicking their white-trimmed tails. Another leaf succumbs to stifling heat, mercury inching higher, our forest feverish. So I'll read one more poem. This is a Texas Hill Country poem, and there's a reference in the poem to the poet Gerard Manley Hopkins and his famous poem, Pied Beauty. This poem is called The Whole Shebang. Sun's up, at least it wants to be, fog hanging on, shining nevertheless on the mountain's tippity top. The pond's unruffled surface all silvery gray, but look, a wee sunny spot, reflected must be, though I don't see how, lots I don't know. No duck, no grebe, no heron, no solitude either. Nutria, feral goats and feral hogs, cycadeer and fallow deer, black buck antelope, and elephants. Just kidding about the elephants, but everything else released, roaming, homing on the range, except for the buffalo, befuddled, bamboozled, blasted away. You just gotta love the lone bird chirping, the phoebe pumping its tail on a branch, and the Spanish oak, color drained from the leaves, half of them still stuck on the tree, ball moss cluttering up the branches. Not a true parasite, though, not like mistletoe or deer ticks or seed ticks. Ever had those? Ho, ho, ho. Real sunshine sliding down the slopes, the whole valley soaking up the golden goods. But winter light, even so. I've been outside and it's cold. Better wear your woolies. New houses on the hilltops far, far away. Metal roofs like shards of broken mirrors flashing more bad news. This whole country shrinking up, but there's a grebe after all, a pied build. Most everything is pied, I mean, but it's not all pretty, as Gerard well knew. Rotten deck planks, for example, though from a distance they look just fine. But some of it, praise God, is like the dappley sun and shade on the wall and the red, bushy blue stem along the edge of the pond. And how about them gobbling gobblers strutting up the hill just now? Reeds and rushes, ho, changing subjects here, dormant though their eventual, inevitable dominion of the whole affair goes largely unchallenged by yours truly, who may need to poison the whole shebang. Just you can't eat the fish for a while, and try telling that to His Highness the double-crested cormorant. But now nearly officially day. Time to get off my butt and do something. So those are my poems. I am going to see if I can share my screen one more time. And if I can.
Yes, we just don't see you anymore.
Okay, well.
Need your video back on.
Yeah, I see. I accidentally clicked it off. Thank you. Okay, here I am. And I share with you employment opportunities, but I also was going to let you know that my chapbook that Cynthia mentioned, Shadow of Wings, is available from Main Street Rag Press. There's a website for that. And then for those of you interested in poetry, if you don't already know about the Poetry Festival at Round Top, it's a great opportunity. They took a break this year due to COVID, but they should be back next year. It's nationally acclaimed poets who come and read their work and talk with one another and conduct workshops. And in the past, they've offered scholarships for college students, so keep that in mind. And also, there's a really fine literary arts organization in San Antonio called Gemini Inc. I've included the website for both of these organizations. And they do classes, workshops, readings, and they hold a summer literary festival. So for those of you who are into such things, those are things you might want to know about if you don't already. And that's what I have to share.
Cool. Well, I let me see first. Are there any questions, Alyssa? Okay, no questions from that end. I just have to say, listening to your poetry, it's so obvious that you or what we need in this world, an observer. I tell people all the time, if you just stop talking and just listen and look, and I know birders do that, where they'll just sit and watch. And your poetry is the epitome. I I could imagine and listen to the crickets, and I could imagine everything that was going on. So you this is what you do. You have your land stewardship, but you are definitely an observer. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I do. I think that is a core part of writing is watching and listening and then trying to find a way to give expression to what it is we see. So yeah, thank you for those very generous words.
Oh, well, and your very first point, you said, well, that one's, violent. But when you sit and observe, you see the big birds knocking the little birds off the limb. And you see things that you don't want to see, but it is nature. And so, to have an understanding as you do of nature, um, we're very lucky to have you own land and know the importance of what's going on and the trees and the water. And you give back by teaching everyone. So I hope you succeed in all of your camps and all of your endeavors, because I could just see it in your heart through your poetry that you are definitely a somebody we need. Wish we had more people.
Well, thanks so much, and thanks too for the opportunity to be with you and all who of you who were there that I can't see, and in this odd virtual COVID world we inhabit. But it's been a real pleasure.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. We've learned so much, and guys, definitely check into all of the camps and everything, because this looks like an amazing opportunity right here in our state and not very far from where we are here in Central Texas. So thank you so much for visiting with us. And before we go, I just want to remind everybody this Wednesday, we have our CTC astronomer, Warren Hart. He's going to talk about the eclipse that's going to go right over our heads in 2024. So make sure that you join us again on Wednesday at noon. And then next Tuesday, we have International Day of Human Spaceflight. We have a person who worked for NASA, and she is going to be talking to us all about space flight. And then the next day, we have the Audubon Society talking about the bird watching. And they're going to be doing an event on why you should give a hoot about bird watching. Remember, this whole year is all about environmental science and what we can do to pretty much save the planet. So thank you again. And you guys, y'all just have a very awesome day. And make sure you check back with us on Wednesday. At this point, Alyssa, if you will take us out, but Mr. Ayres, don't leave yet.